What is up? Today we're going to go through some squat pattern variations. Now my first goal is going to be, let's set some form standards or some movement pattern standards, and then we'll show you how to regress them. If you can't get into those positions, we'll show you how to make it a little bit easier, and then we'll show you how to load it to make it a little bit more challenging for you. So first thing, a body weight squat. What we're looking for here is those feet are completely in contact with the ground. You're forcing those knees out. That'll get your hips a little bit lower. Now we're looking to make sure that those hips are below the knee. Throughout the entire range of motion. If you're having a little trouble with that, maybe try using a chair to help balance you. Try to do your best to keep those feet on the floor, force those knees out, and then just use that chair to help stabilize you at the bottom. Another way you can do it is using a box. So what I'm doing here is sitting back onto a cooler, forcing those knees out, trying to really load the hips. And what you can do over time is, if this starts getting easier, let's just drop that box a little bit lower and a little bit lower. You can stack some books, maybe some bricks, or use a lower stool of some sort. So let's get into some loading patterns. This is a 2 dumbbell or 2 kettlebell front squat. The weight's out in front of you. Now ideally you might have some dumbbells or kettlebells at home, but that's not always the case. If you only have one, we can use one right in front. We call this more of a goblet squat, where you're using 2 arms and one single weight, just holding it like a goblet. You can also load it with odd objects around the house. So we call this a front loaded squat. Here I'm using a water jug, creates a lot of instability. You could also use a front loaded with a heavy bag or dog food bag. You can load it over one shoulder. So right now I just want to give you a bunch of different variations that you can play with depending on what you have at home. So here's a 1-arm variation where we're in a front loaded position, so you're kind of challenging the core a little bit. As an added challenge, you can add an explosive jump squat. So basically what we're going to do is squat down to depth, explode up, and then back down into that squat and absorb the landing. This is a great option if you don't have much weight at home. It makes it a little bit more challenging. You can also, if you do have weight at home, you can add a front-loaded jump squat. So you're holding the weight, squat down, jump, absorb that landing, just like we were doing before. Now we can also do what we call a vertical squat pattern, where we're going in a more upright torso. The heels are elevated here, so I have some bricks under my heels. Just allows you to make it a little bit easier. It takes the ankle range of motion out of the equation. So you can play around with overhead squat patterns as well. That'll make it a little bit more challenging. You can load it at the side using 2 dumbbells. Again, in this particular pattern, we're looking for a more upright torso. We call this is more common in a thing like a front squat or a high bar squat versus a low bar squat, which we usually get into in our barbell training. Now again, you can load yourself in various different ways: 1 arm overhead, 2 arms overhead. You can take odd objects, dumbbells, kettlebells, water jugs, cinder blocks. Here's a 2-arm, feet elevated overhead squat. And that overhead squat really challenges your mobility quite a bit. Again, if you're limited on loads, you can add another challenge by pausing your squats at the bottom for 1 to 5 seconds. Or you could do what we call a pulsing squat, where you come up just a little bit, drop back down into that squat, and then before coming back up. You can also do multiple pulses before you go all the way up. So that's all our squat patterns right there. There's plenty of variability. I would say when you're first starting out, do something that seems a little bit more familiar first, and then every workout, maybe try to play around with a more challenging movement pattern or something you haven't tried before. I highly recommend taking video of your lifts so you can see what you're doing wrong. Take a look at the depth, make sure you get those hips below the knees if possible, really try to force those knees out, and really try to focus on keeping a flat or neutral spine throughout the range of motion. That's all I got for you today. Get after it.